Star Wars Fandom Part 2. The original sequels. The Empire may strike back, but the Jedi will return. In the last video, we looked at what series of events led up to the phenomenon that is Star Wars A New Hope. We also looked at the power of myth on a culture. Star Wars A New Hope, by itself, became the #1 earning movie of all time, and that would have been an amazing accomplishment by itself. But the newly formed Lucasfilm set out to do more, follow up A New Hope with an even more mind-blowing sequel. This movie, of course, is the genius of Rian Johnson's Last Jedi. I am so kidding on that. That movie is like the Florida Man of the Star Wars franchise. I don't even know what that means. I just like the sound of it. Unlike today with social media and the YouTubes and virtually all forms of digital entertainment, the 1980s audiences pretty much had no spoilers. So let's just say the plot twist at the end of the movie was pretty darn shocking. Nowadays, this movie is almost universally considered to be probably the best of the 9+ Star Wars movies. But surprisingly, when it came out, it got some mixed reviews. Also, Empire Strikes Back is the highest grossing sequel when you adjust for inflation. One major difference between A New Hope and Empire was the former ended with victory for the rebellion and a major black eye for the Galactic Empire. Empire Strikes Back ended like a tragedy. Han Solo could be dead, for all we know. Luke had been thoroughly defeated in a battle that was even more devastating and made him question everything he had learned thus far from a truth that his father told him. Also, he got his hand cut off. Ouch. Empire ended with the rebellion defeated, but they had survived. They had survived the worst. Everything that the Galactic Empire could throw at them. Even at a great cost, they still survived. Like I said in the first one, aside from A New Hope, I was at opening weekend of all the Star Wars movies. Well, I found out from my mom that that is not quite accurate. Empire had been out for a little while in the US by the time it got to our part of the world. You see, we lived in Iceland in 1980, and new movies came later to us than the US. I'm not Icelandic. My dad was in the military and we were stationed there. But I think it still counts. It was opening weekend for us. I had to ask my mom what was the reaction to the line, "No, I am your father." She said there were literal gasps, and even one person asking, "What the fuck?" What a swerve. By the way, this is how you subvert an audience, Mr. Zion Bronson. Empire Strikes Back is one of the very first, best examples of a sequel doing better than the original. Some say The Godfather 2 is better than The Godfather, and objectively, I agree. But The Godfather had Marlon Brando, and he's my favorite actor. So, the first Godfather still wins with me. As an audience, it's easy to fantasize about being Luke Skywalker when he blows up the Death Star and gets a shiny new medal from Princess of Alderaan. But when things have gone to shit, it's a lot harder to want to be him. But the amazing team of George Lucas, Lawrence Kasdan, and Irving Kershner did just that. Instead of going away from the theater with a feeling of jubilation and triumph, like you did with A New Hope, the audience left the theater with a gut punch. To say America in the 80s was a different time in history is a bit of an understatement. The nation was just coming off of the Jimmy Carter administration. Ronald Reagan, aka the Gipper, would soon take office. The Iran hostage crisis was still ongoing. This is when the Iranian government kidnapped 66 Americans. The nation was facing shortages of petroleum, which was a stark contrast to the previous decades when gasoline was incredibly cheap. The 70s had officially ended, but what we think of as being the 80s had yet to begin. The nation was in a slightly weird limbo where the collective identity had not been established yet. This is the environment that The Empire Strikes Back was released into. This was the environment that The Empire Strikes Back was released into. Unlike the time it was released, this movie knew exactly what it was. Vader had really come into his own as a badass villain who only answered to the Emperor himself. Luke had to deal with the struggle on his quest to become a Jedi. So in a way, this could be a cool comparison with the nation at this time. The US was on the verge of reinventing itself from the issues that I had mentioned before. At this point in history, America was entering its fourth decade of the Cold War with the USSR. 40 years of tension along with military and nuclear buildup between the two superpowers. I was alive during the 80s and I remember it was kind of tense. 1980 was also the first year that cable television started to get a wider adoption rate. It was at the price of $7.50 with the basic bundle. That would be roughly around $22 nowadays. Wow, it's actually not that bad when you think about it. A year later, a small channel dedicated to music would debut. I wonder whatever happened to that channel. Even the internet was starting to grow beyond its military roots to a low number of early adopters with this bizarre technology. As far as the movies go, The Empire Strikes Back easily tops everybody else with nearly $182 million. The other movies at the time that were in the top 5 were 9 to 5, Stir Crazy, Airplane, and Any Which Way You Can. This was an unusually good year for comedic movies. Nice. By 1981, you start to see this trend of action adventure blockbuster types of movies. They really start to come into their own, with films like the Lucas Spielberg classic Raiders of the Lost Ark, Superman 2, Time Bandits, and the criminally underrated movie Excalibur. Seriously, despite its flaws, and it has them, and being highly dated, I still fucking love this movie. A little known fact about Star Wars is it's all about the toys. At least it was during the late 70s and 80s. Originally, the Mego company, the biggest action figure distributor at the time, was offered the Star Wars toy line in 1976 before the movie. But Mego declined and it was picked up by Kenner, a division of General Mills Fun Group. Kenner was one of the first toy makers to introduce a 3 3/4 action figure with the Star Wars line. As a kid, I'll tell you what, it was awesome. You could recreate popular scenes from movies. Why is this important to The Empire Strikes Back? Because Lucas very wisely kept the licensing right to the Star Wars merch. This had never been done before because no one thought to do it. The Kenner line of Star Wars toys were so successful that George Lucas was able to independently use the funds to finance The Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. Before the internet, times were very different, needless to say. If you wanted to know any news on an upcoming movie, you had very few options. Magazines, Entertainment Tonight, and of course, the trailer. What was a little different this time was the Kenner line of Empire Strikes Back toys hit the market before the movie. It wasn't like an entire script leaking online, but it might have been more awesome nonetheless. With toys and no context, you were free to speculate and use your imagination and kind of create the movie in your head. I remember being in Iceland recreating the Battle of Hoth with my neighbor kids. It was on the naval base we were living. Eventually, the toys would get lost in the giant mounds of snow, and when the snow melted, it was like finding treasure. With all these figures you had lost during the winter. Not only did Star Wars Kenner line of toys help finance the sequels, but it became a toy juggernaut in its own right, making an estimated $9 billion by 2007. I mentioned this before in the last movie, but Luke Skywalker is based in large part on a hero of 1,000 faces, outlined in the Joseph Campbell book. Part of the hero's journey is to learn from usually a hermit but powerful mage as a mentor. In A New Hope, that was Ben Kenobi. This time, we find an even more deceptively powerful space wizard. We were disarmed by Yoda's appearance. We learned that we must do or do not. There is no try, and not believing something can be done is the reason why we fail. Yoda also voices some legitimate concerns, like Luke is too emotionally volatile, just like his father Anakin. We hear mention of Anakin in A New Hope, but now we get a little insight into the man that was Luke's father. We also see Luke's fear of turning to the dark side as well, along with some pretty sweet foreshadowing. Luke leaves his training early to try to save his friends. Needless to say, Vader cleans his clocks and toys with Luke like an apex predator would play with its prey. Then the epic reveal. No, I am your father. I thought about doing a section on the Mandela effect as it relates to this line, but I decided against it. Anyway, Luke does the opposite of what Vader hoped. Vader wanted a son by his side ruling the galaxy. I'm sure part of that must have been attractive to Luke, but he didn't. Instead, he does what Obi-Wan tells him. Trust the Force. He seemingly jumps to his doom rather than be used as a tool by evil. By doing this, he can discover another truth, that Leia is in fact his sister. Now, this is a little disturbing since the Princess of Alderaan planted a big juicy kiss on her big brother. Yes, Luke is older. But ultimately, Luke learns the importance of surrender. Also, that anyone is capable of evil, even himself. The date is May 25th, 1983, and we who were alive to witness saw an end of an era. But a Jedi returns. I'm going to be honest with you, my friends. Return of the Jedi is my favorite Star Wars movie. I know, objectively, that Empire is a far superior movie, but Jedi was always my favorite. Perhaps this is the first movie that I remember waiting in line to see. That could be it. Originally, it was going to be called Revenge of the Jedi, but Lucas changed it because he didn't think that the Jedi were people that sought revenge. This movie was again written by Lawrence Kasdan and George Lucas, but it was directed by Richard Marquand. You see, originally George wanted Steven Spielberg to direct the final installment of the trilogy, but there was an ongoing battle with the Directors Guild about credits being in the beginning of the movie, which we all know Star Wars doesn't have. It has that big scroll. So that discluded Spielberg. Anyway, they had to go with Marquand. I personally think this is a sore subject for Lucas, because he really wanted Spielberg in there, but anyway, he regards the movie as being okay. The movie was filmed under the working title of Blue Harvest, with a tagline of horror beyond imagination. This is common practice now, but in '83 it was necessary to keep the movie under wraps. Also, this helped to prevent price gouging from some of the servicers. The movie ended up doing $475 million at the box office, and expanded the Star Wars universe even more. We got to see Jabba the Hutt for the first time. We saw why the Emperor was so feared, even by Vader. The Sarlacc, cool stuff. And Ewoks, the savage little people that loved human flesh and were guerrilla warfare geniuses. There, I said it. And of course, what every man, and probably women too, of my generation remembers of this movie with crystal clear clarity. Leia in her golden bikini. Wow. That's all I have to say. Here we see Luke return to his roots on Tatooine, but this is a very different Luke altogether. This Luke dresses in all black, perhaps similar to a priest or a monk, or this could be Luke coming to terms with Darth Vader being his father. Either way, it's my favorite iteration of Luke Skywalker. Luke does go through all the steps of the hero's journey, and ultimately faces his father, not to defeat him, but to try and save him. This is why I love Luke. His superpower isn't his lightsaber skill or his proficiency with the Force. Hope is Luke's superpower. When everybody wanted to destroy Darth Vader, Luke tried to save him because he knew that somewhere in there was Anakin Skywalker. Luke only attacks Vader when he threatens his sister. He succeeds because his father saves him and ultimately kills Darth Vader, also the Emperor, and reclaims himself as Anakin Skywalker in doing so. Luke fulfills his journey with the powers to bestow boons, on his fellow man. In this case, he gives the galaxy peace from a tyranny of the Galactic Empire. Luke also ushers in, quite literally, the return of the Jedi. At least until Luke gets a bad feeling and tries to commit nipicide on Emo Ren, so Homeboy unalives and burns the whole summer camp, and Luke goes to Ireland to fish, drink green milk, and hang out with some funny-looking puffins until he dies. I so dislike The Last Jedi so much. Why, Zion Bronson? Why? Okay, I've gotten my 40-something man-baby moment out of the way. But at least he completes the hero's journey before that. As awesome as Return of the Jedi was, it was also bittersweet. It was fantastic that we got a resolution to such a modern-day mythology, but it also meant there would be no more Star Wars. As an audience, we wanted more, but would ultimately have to wait 16 more years to get any more Star Wars movies. Trust me, that was a difficult time in a lot of our lives. If you like my content, please like and subscribe. Next time, we'll be looking at the prequels. Yeah, baby. And as always, fare thee well, my friends, and take care.